Hello, Mr. Hardy here, and in this video I would like to teach you about Act 3, Scene 4 of Macbeth by Shakespeare. As per usual, you need to be familiar with this scene. Maybe you've read it, listened to it, watched it, or studied it previously. And again, in the same pattern, I will start by summarising the plot, exploring the characters, themes, contexts, some quotes and techniques, and leaving you with a couple of tasks you can do at the end of the video to solidify your knowledge. So, Act 3, Scene 4 of Macbeth. What happens? Well, this scene is often called the banquet scene or the feast scene, and Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are hosting a banquet or a feast to celebrate their coronation, to celebrate them becoming King and Queen of Scotland. So the party gets underway and the first murderer appears, sort of blood splattered. So Macbeth pulls to the side to talk to the first murderer, and the first murderer reports that Banquo is killed, and he says that he'd cut his throat, but he reports that Fleance has escaped. And this upsets Macbeth because the prophecy of that the witches gave that Banquo's heirs will become kings is still a possibility with Fleance alive, but at this stage Macbeth isn't overly concerned. He reckons he can rectify and fix this later on. So the first murderer leaves. Macbeth is then approached by his wife Lady Macbeth, who says, "Come on now, be cheerful, your guests are here, this is our coronation, this could really make or break our reign over Scotland. If we have a good feast and everyone sees that we are a good king and a good queen, we should have a successful reign." So Lady Macbeth is really concerned about making a good impression. So Macbeth tries to be cheerful and get the party going. However, at this moment, Banquo's ghost enters the scene and actually sits in Macbeth's seat, and Macbeth becomes quite unsettled at seeing a ghost. Now, I've seen some productions where Banquo's ghost is physically on stage. So they've got the actor who played Banquo, they've maybe splattered the actor in blood, maybe put on some kind of white paint, face and body paint to make him look a bit more ghostly, and the character of Banquo's ghost is physically on the stage. Likewise, I've also seen some productions where they've just left it blank, so there is no Banquo's ghost that the audience can see, and it is Macbeth sort of talking at an empty chair, talking at a genuinely invisible ghost. Both performances can be quite powerful. Maybe you could look up different performances and see them for yourself. Anyway, after Macbeth has been unsettled and he says, "Never shake thy gory locks at me," Banquo's ghost leaves. And this makes Macbeth look quite mad, quite delusional, because he is literally talking, as far as the audience and the other characters on stage are concerned, to an empty chair. So Lady Macbeth tries to cover up for her husband's strange outburst and states that he often has these kinds of fits, which Lady Macbeth is trying to use as an excuse. However, it's a really weak excuse, because even if it was true and Banquo's ghost wasn't there, do you really want the king of your country to be someone who suffers from fits where he sees imaginary things and talks to imaginary people? At this point, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are really struggling to hold on to that control. It's sort of slipping away from them. Lady Macbeth tells her husband off. I've used the word chide. Chide is like when a parent normally tells off a child. Lady Macbeth goes up to her husband Macbeth and says, "Are you a man?" And she uses that masculine identity and questioning the gender roles. Seriously, get your act together, pull yourself together, and sort it out. Stop acting so erratically. So Macbeth, after this sort of pep talk or chiding, pulls himself together, regains his composure, and actually proposes a toast to Banquo, who, as we know, isn't at the feast because he's been murdered by the murderers. And it's at this exact moment where Banquo's ghost returns again. Now, depending on your performance, maybe there is an actor playing the ghost, or maybe it is just Macbeth looking at nothing and reacting to it. So Banquo's ghost appears, and Macbeth loses his cool again. He actually says, "Avaunt and quit my sight," which basically means go away, Shakespeare's equivalent for go away. So Macbeth's erratic behaviour really is a mood kill, and the party is well and truly over. So Lady Macbeth instructs the other thanes and lords to go home. This is quite an interesting note because again, looking at gender roles at the time, a woman should not have this much power over the other lords, particularly the male lords and thanes in the room. But if you remember all the way back to Act 1, where she has subverted her sexuality, she's gone for those masculine traits when she asks the spirits to fill her up, she is so powerful at this stage that she is able to instruct male thanes to go away, and they listen to her. But really, it's too late. Lady Macbeth can't recover the situation. Macbeth's reputation is being questioned, and the party has drawn to an early end. Macbeth, this now just Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are on stage. Macbeth expresses his concerns that Macduff did not attend the banquet, and this immediately frames Macduff as the main rival to Macbeth. So by not attending the banquet, he's showing disrespect to Macbeth, and this sort of foreshadows the fact that Macduff might be the person who undoes Macbeth's success and reign on the throne. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth continue talking, and Macbeth talks about blood and talks about sleep, and as we know, these are symbolic. Blood is symbolic of violence, sleep is symbolic of peace, and the question sort of makes Macbeth resolve to go and visit the Weird Sisters for answers. He wants to find out what the future holds, and he's placing his trust in the supernatural, which could be a very, very big mistake indeed. So, the key characters in the scene. We have Macbeth, and he starts off in control. You know, the party is being run to celebrate his coronation. You know, the murderer comes in, he says Banquo's dead, but Fleance has escaped, and Macbeth is quite cool. He says, you know, never mind, I'll sort it out later. He appears, you know, quite powerful at this stage. But then when he sees Banquo's ghost, not once but twice, Macbeth loses that control. And really, he loses it completely by the end of the scene. He comes across as quite mad and unstable. Lady Macbeth also has this same struggle with control. She starts off in control, you know, she's the hostess of the party, she welcomes people, she tells people to be merry and have fun. And then her husband sees Banquo's ghost and acts strangely, and she tries to hold on to this control by saying that he often has these fits, that you should ignore him, that he'll be fine in a minute. But when Macbeth sees Banquo's ghost for the second time and truly loses it, even Lady Macbeth has to release the control she had and send everyone home and sort of concede defeat. The first murderer really just advances the plot by reporting what happened to Macbeth, that Banquo is dead and Fleance has escaped. We see Lennox have a few lines, and Ross and some of the other lords speak together. Really, they're just advancing the plot. And Banquo's ghost, you know, some productions show him as a physical actor on stage, some don't. It really depends on the director. But what Banquo's ghost does is it brings up the theme of madness versus supernatural. Now, I've had some excellent discussions with my students in class. Personally, I think Banquo's ghost is a supernatural occurrence, that maybe God has sent Banquo's ghost to punish Macbeth with madness and to show him that if you do evil, unethical things, that God will punish you. However, I've had many students in class argue that Banquo's ghost is born of madness, of his heat-oppressed brain. And actually, Lady Macbeth also says in this scene that Banquo's ghost to Macbeth was the same as that air-drawn dagger which led him to Duncan. So my students and I have mulled this over and had a debate. Some of us think Banquo's ghost is a supernatural occurrence. Some think it's just born of Macbeth's mad brain. I'll leave that for you to decide. Thematically, we have the theme of evil. Macbeth kills his best friend, and there are consequences. So whether you want to consider it God, which is what the Jacobean audience and 11th century Scotland would have considered it, or take the more modern approach of considering like the universe or something, if you do an evil action, there is a consequence. And I think Banquo's ghost represents that consequence, and it drives Macbeth into madness. Power is a key theme, but I've retitled it Control in this scene. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are just beginning to enjoy the fruits of their labour. They've murdered King Duncan, they're now King and Queen of Scotland. This is what they want, they have all the control of the country. But instead of being able to hold on to that control, they lose it almost immediately. This is the first thing they really do as King and Queen. They hold a banquet or a feast, and in this they lose the control that they'd worked so hard to gain. The theme of supernatural, again with Banquo's ghost. Do you believe it's a real ghost? Do you believe God sent it as punishment? Or would you explore the theme of madness and say that Banquo's ghost is just a figment of Macbeth's imagination, and all that guilt and repressed emotion is coming forwards and manifesting itself in some sort of spectral being? And there is the symbolism at the end, which I'll go into in a bit more detail on the next slide, but really blood and sleep are the key sort of symbols that Shakespeare uses in this scene. So we know that blood is symbolic of violence. Macbeth says, "It will have blood," they say, "blood will have blood." So in this quote, we've got that word blood 3 times. We have a triplet of blood, and it's really focusing on this idea of violence and death, which of course we would expect in a tragedy. We know that sleep is symbolic of peace, and at the end of the scene, Lady Macbeth says to her husband, "You lack the season of all nature's sleep." That basically means you need to sleep. All natural beings need sleep. Come on, let's get you to bed and you'll be feeling better in the morning. And Macbeth responds with, "Come, will to sleep." Yes, let's go to bed, let's sort of rest this off. But really, we know from previous scenes that Macbeth hath murdered sleep. He will never get that peace back. He will never be able to rest. And if you know about the physiology and psychology of the human body, if you don't sleep, if you don't get sufficient sleep, you will eventually go mad. Your body will get stressed, your brain will get stressed, and you'll make bad decisions. And this is what Macbeth's fate, or what fate has in store for Macbeth. Last video I introduced you to hamartia, which was a Greek word. I want to introduce you to another key Greek word you can use and bring into your essay writing. This word is hubris. It is Greek, and it means excessive pride leading to a character's downfall. Now, Macbeth is a character full of pride. He sort of believes he's in control of everything. If he murders King Duncan, he can become king, and it happens. If he murders Banquo and Fleance, then they won't become kings after him. His own kids will become kings. He believes that he lives a charmed life, and he actually says this later on in the play, and that everything will work out well for him. And believe it or not, his hubris gets even bigger, despite seeing the ghost, despite going mad and losing a lot of his respect from the other Thanes. Macbeth's hubris grows once he goes to visit the witches again. So how do you use hubris, which means excessive pride, in a sentence? Well, you might want to write a sentence like this. Macbeth's hubristic nature makes him believe that he can control everything. Or Macbeth's hubris makes him feel that he is untouchable. Or Macbeth's hubris makes him feel that he is immortal, cannot be overturned, leads a charmed life. Some of those ideas we'll explore as we move further on in the play Macbeth. But I just wanted to introduce you to that key Greek word, which means excessive pride, hubris, and you can start trying to use it in your essay writing. So, some key quotes to remember from Act 3, Scene 4. His throat is cut, that I did for him. Fleance is scaped. Scaped means escaped here. And this is just the first murderer reporting to Macbeth. Thou canst not say I did it. Never shake thy gory locks at me. This is Macbeth talking to Banquo's ghost the first time it appears. Thou means you. You cannot say I did it. You cannot say I murdered you. Never shake thy gory locks at me. Thy means you. Never shake your gory. The adjective gory means like blood and guts. Now we know from the murderer that Banquo had his throat cut. Not only that, he received lots of slashes and attacks to his head and to his body. So the idea of blood going on Banquo's locks. Locks means hair. So he's sort of got bloody hair. Imagine a ghost shaking its head and sort of flecks of spectral blood are scattering everywhere. It's quite a dramatic, quite a horrifying image. Lady Macbeth, when she chides her husband, when she tells off Macbeth, uses the question, "Are you a man?" This is a great place to explore those themes of gender identity and gender roles and subverting them and the expectations surrounding that. The second time Banquo's ghost returns, Macbeth again is startled and he says, "Avaunt and quit my sight." Avaunt is a Shakespearean sort of phrase for go away. Quit my sight means, get out of my sight. This is an old-fashioned way, an archaic way of saying go away. So maybe next time you're in a position where you're being wound up by someone, instead of saying go away, you can do a Shakespearean Macbeth phrase and say avaunt and quit my sight. But go at once. I've included this quote because it shows that Lady Macbeth is surprisingly powerful for a woman in the Jacobean era and in 11th century Alba, Scotland, to be able to instruct men and for them to sort of listen to her and obey her, particularly thanes and lords, is quite unusual. And we know that all this stems from her welcoming those evil spirits into her all the way back in Act 1. I just want to bring up these quotes again. I've used them before. But they are symbolic. Blood will have blood. Blood symbolises violence. Macbeth is predicting that more blood will be shed in the play. And for those of you who have read to the end of the play, you know that more blood is indeed shed. So this is like a foreshadowing, a prediction of things to come. And it's this idea that Macbeth killed King Duncan to get to the throne of Scotland. So what's stopping another person killing Macbeth to get to the throne? And what's stopping another person dethroning that king and usurping the next king, and so on, so on, so on. You sort of see this in modern day life with sort of gang culture. If one gang attacks another gang, the other gang wants revenge, and then when they get revenge, the other gang wants revenge, and it sort of goes on and on and on. And Macbeth is caught in this chain of blood. Blood keeps on producing blood, violence keeps on producing violence. There may not be an end in sight. And we have that symbolic theme of peace, which is represented through sleep. So Macbeth says, come will to sleep, come on, let's go get some peace. But really it seems highly unlikely he will ever experience peace again based on what he's done, which at this stage is kill King Duncan, commit regicide, kill a good man who was a good ruler, and order for the death of his best friend Banquo, who again was a good and innocent man. So really Macbeth, peace is out of your reach. You've done far too many evil deeds to ever sleep peacefully again. So you can make some notes from this video on a physical copy of Macbeth, get some highlighters out, make a few notes, maybe add those Greek words into your revision. You can have a go at answering the question. A student said, the banquet scene is the moment where Macbeth's fate is sealed. How far do you agree with this statement? So this question is sort of asking you to evaluate, is Act 3, Scene 4 the moment where Macbeth's fate, his doomed tragic ending, is sealed? Or do you think there's moments before this, maybe when he consults the three witches, or maybe when he murders King Duncan? Or do you think there's moments after this that are more significant? For those of you who've read ahead some of Macbeth's actions in Act 4 and 5. There is no right or wrong answer, as there is in English. It's more to do with how you argue your point and present your ideas with quotes and techniques and explanations. Do you agree that the banquet scene is the most important scene, the moment where Macbeth's fate is sealed? If you do, present your evidence and explain it. If you don't, compare it to another scene and explain why you think that scene is more important in showing how Macbeth's fate is sealed. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing to my channel so you don't miss any other analytical videos. And feel free to leave a comment if you think I have missed out on anything, or if you want to tell me whether you believe the ghost is born of supernatural or madness. Well, thank you for your attention, and I'll see you on the next one.